welcome to a new episode of Tell Muses. This is our spring interview with the loveliest Jackie Ross in this podcast, which comes from storytellers. It is done with storytellers and it is addressed to storytellers and anyone interested in the lovely world of oral storytelling. So, Jackie, you're up on the further northern part of Europe in Scotland. Please let us know how it is there with you. How are you?
Oh, I'm great. Thanks, Despina. Yeah, and hello, Simona, too. Today we have sunshine, which is really lovely because we've not had a lot of sunshine up here in Scotland recently. But it's a beautiful part of the world to live in, and I feel very fortunate to be surrounded by lovely countryside and live in an area that is populated by stories. And by that, I mean that all around me there are tales of fairies and witches and giants. So Scotland is a wonderful place to live.
I want to visit so much. I think, Simona, you have been there, haven't you?
Yeah. I've been to Scotland more than once, and it's a beautiful place. My recollection of Scotland, it's a bit sunnier than what you described because I was there during the heat wave last summer, and I had something like an hour of drizzle, not even rain. An hour of drizzle in 10 days in Scotland.
Well, I don't want to give the impression that it rains all the time because actually we have a lot of sunshine, but this winter has been pretty miserable, I have to say.
So, for people
So,
listening, this interview today takes place on the
uh,
World Storytelling Day. It will be released later on, but it's taking place on the 20th of March, one day before the spring equinox. So, we're so looking forward to the coming of spring and the ascent of Persephone. So, Jackie, I'd
definitely.
like to ask you if you
Hmm.
could tell our listeners who Jackie Ross is.
Well, I'm a Scottish quine, and that means a woman, a girl from Scotland, because up here in the northeast we speak a dialect of the Scots language, of which I am very proud. So my mother tongue is Scots. And quite often when I tell stories, I tell in Scots. So I am a storyteller. I'm a retired teacher. I'm a farmer's wife. Oh, and I'm a publisher. As I mentioned, I'm very proud of our dialect. So a friend and I publish books in our local dialect for children to keep the language alive and thriving. And that's one of the things I like to do as a storyteller as well, to encourage people to use the language. Yesterday, I was doing a workshop with parents and children, and one of the boys said, "How old are you?" And all the parents went, but I don't mind telling my age. So I said, "Yes, I'm 64." He says, "Have you got the pension yet?" It was very funny. I love telling to children, they have no inhibition.
And Jackie, how did your passion for stories and storytelling start? Well, you told us that you live in a place that is full of stories, but how did you get in touch with these stories?
Mm. Well, Simona, as long as I can remember, I have loved telling myself stories. You know, I grew up on a farm and we would have daily chores to do. You know, we would have to bed the cattle, you know, give them some straw to lay on or feed the cows. And some of these jobs were quite repetitive and boring, so I would make them more interesting by making up stories. You know, I would be the princess who'd been captured by a wicked laird or wizard or something. And so I think I loved reading. And my mother must have told me stories about the local giants and witches. I don't remember her doing that, but I can only imagine that that's where they came from. And my grandmother, too. I remember once taking my teddy bear down to my grandmother. It had lost its eye. And she said, "Oh, Jack Frost has stolen your Teddy's eye." So I obviously grew up surrounded by these kind of snatches of local lore and story ideas. And of course, very lucky to be told, the traditional tales like Goldilocks and Red Riding Hood and so on. So although my family wouldn't consider themselves to be storytellers, I think when I was young, many, many people were surrounded by story, because it was just what you did with your children. And then it actually officially started in the year 2000 when a friend and I got a grant from the Millennium Forest for Scotland people, and we said we were going to do storytelling in woodlands, to raise awareness of woodlands, etc. As part of that grant, we got to go on training courses, and I was on a plane going down to Emerson College, south of London, where they do lots of training courses. And I was reading a book called Exodus to Afford, written by Stanley Robertson. And Stanley Robertson was of the travelling people. And this book contains stories of his family that would travel up Donside and down Deeside and camp at various places. And one of the places they would camp was Lumphanan, which is where I live. So there was an immediate connection there. And then I read one of the stories that people would tell round the campfire, and it was called Jack and the Skinny Coo. So Jack and the Very Thin Cow. I loved this story because I was surrounded by cows. I grew up loving cows. And this story spoke to me, and I thought, yeah, I want to be a storyteller. And so that was it. And then later, I was very lucky that I got to meet and got to know Stanley Robertson very well. In fact, the very first time I told Jack and the Skinny Coo in public was on stage with Stanley Robertson, which was a bit terrifying because I didn't know him at that time. If I had known him, it wouldn't have been terrifying because he was a very generous man and very encouraging. So he kind of took me under his wing a little bit and encouraged me to keep telling stories. So that was good.
Also, there's a brilliant community of storytellers in Scotland. For example, particularly in the area where you live, the Aberdeen area. Aberdeenshire, is it called Aberdeenshire?
It's, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, would you like to tell us something about the
Yeah.
wider community of storytellers in Scotland and the work that you do in your community, for
Yeah.
example?
Well, I think we are very lucky in Scotland because the Scottish Storytelling Centre in Edinburgh was set up more than 20 years ago, and Donald Smith was a big factor in that. And that, I think, saw a huge revival of storytelling across the country. And so, that builds up a community of storytellers that supports one another. And I'm actually vice chair of the Scottish Storytelling Forum, which supports storytelling in the country. But Grace Banks and I, lives in Aberdeen, we met, gosh, if we met about 20 years ago, then the Storytelling Forum must be much older than that. We set up the Grampian Association of Storytellers to support storytelling in Aberdeen and Aberdeenshire, and it is still going. I'm not so heavily involved now because I'm more at the national level, but GAS still provides monthly storytelling sessions, and they do this wonderful thing called the Fireside Chat, which is online once a month, and it invites storytellers to come and talk about their practice, which is really interesting. And in fact, just this week, Pauline Cordner was talking about a project that she had done with Ewan McVicker, looking at a lady from the Northeast who had collected poems and nursery rhymes and stories way back in the last century. 2 centuries ago now. So Pauline had been doing lots of work with local children. Again, this is in our local dialect. So it was really interesting learning about that project. And GAS also do workshops and different things to promote and encourage storytelling in the area. Supported by the centre in Edinburgh too. And of course, we have the Scottish International Storytelling Festival in October, which is quite widely known across the storytelling world and features local as well as international tellers. So we're very proud of that. And although it's largely based in Edinburgh, there is what we call the Go Local programme. So we have lots of like satellite festivals that are going on at the same time. Again, GAS is involved in providing workshops and storytelling during that time.
Both me and Simona, we're like linguistic buffs. We're so interested in different languages and dialects and everything. And I have heard people from Scotland telling Doric, which was so interesting. So I wanted to ask you, there's Scots, there's Doric. How many dialects, living dialects, are there that you're trying to preserve?
In Scotland, last summer, they just passed the Scottish Languages Act, which gives equal recognition to three of the languages spoken in Scotland, that being English, Gaelic, and Scots. They didn't include the fourth, which is British Sign Language, because they felt it needed a separate act, so that's being dealt with separately. But Scots is a sister language to English. It's a Germanic language at root. And within Scots, there are many dialects. The linguists will argue about this. You know, Shetland has its own dialect, Orkney has its own. Doric is generally the dialect of the northeast of Scotland, which is Aberdeen, Aberdeenshire, Moray, that sort of thing. Glasgow has a very distinct dialect. If somebody is talking full-on Glaswegian, I struggle to keep up. There's Borders, there's Ayrshire. And even within those areas, there are linguistic differences. In the northeast, we talk about fisher dialect and farming dialect. So the coastal areas have different words, different pronunciation from the farming communities. Yeah, I find it quite exciting. When we come to publish, it can be tricky because there's no standard spelling for Scots. But for me, that gives you a freedom. You can spell it the way it sounds because it is a very phonetic language. You know, in our books, we say we recognise that this is not the only way to spell the word or to even pronounce the word because it will vary. But it's about a living language. We are presenting one of the linguistic versions.
For the people who are not familiar with Scots dialects, I should tell you now that that evil lad who had captured Jackie when she was but a young lass is an evil
Oh,
lord, actually. So just, so that people understand what we're talking about. And I'm sure that both Simona, like myself, are dying to listen to the Jack and the skinny cow story. Would you like to share it with us, Jackie?
okay. I sometimes tell stories for the students at the Elphinstone Institute at Aberdeen University. And Nick, who is the lecturer, says, "Now, Jackie, we want the 10-minute version, please." Okay, well, I'm going to tell Jack and the Skinny Coo in Doric, and I'll give you just a brief outline just so to set the scene. So the story is about a young lad, well, a young man who lives with his mother, and they're farming people, not rich, but they live off the land, and their cow has run dry, so they need a new cow. Jack goes to get the cow, and then we have a bit of adventure. And I don't really want to tell you too much about that because it'd be a bit of a spoiler. If at some point I think my Doric is getting far too tricky, I will throw in some English words to help. Okay. Jack and the Skinny Coo. Jack bid wee's mither in a wee hoose in the country. Now one day his mother came and said, Jack, the coo's gone dry. We need a new coo, so awa to the mart and get in. Now be sure and get a right milky coo. We need lots of milk so I can make cheese and butter to sell. Aye, aye, mother, nae bother, I will get a nice milky cow. So Jack heads off to the mart to buy a coo. And he's looking at all the different beasts for sale when somebody comes and taps on his shoulder. And when Jack turns round, there's this little wee manny wi' a humpy back like a tap o' ben a he. That's a local hill. Tapping him on the shoulder. Jack says, Hello, fit can I do for you? How can I help you? And the wee man says, Oh, it's me that can help you, my lad. I have the perfect coo for you and your mother. Well, Jack goes with the wee manny to look at the coo, but oh me, when he sees this beast, he says, This coo's nae use for onything. She is useless. She is nothing but a rickle o' bones covered o'er wi' skin. She's so thin she canna possibly produce ony milk. But somehow he ends up buying the coo, and he taks it home. Well, his mother is nae happy. Oh my goodness, he gets a right row. He is in severe trouble, and she sends him to his bed, even though he's a grown man. Well, the next morning, his mother is still a bitty frosty kind. So Jack decides that he'll ging and milk the coo. Well, he gets a right surprise, because out of this rickle of beans comes the creamiest, frothiest milk you ever seen. Oh, it's rare. It's just perfect. And he's fair tricket, really pleased, and says his mother. Well, he decides he's going to milk the coo fae noo on. And the next morning, when he's busy milking her, Fa would come across the close, but the wee manny with a humpy back like a back of a he. Aye, aye, Jack, foo you doing? I'm okay, says Jack. How are you yourself? Well, the wee man says, I'm fine, but I have a problem. That coo wasna mine to sell. She didn't belong to me at all. In fact, she belongs to the devil, to All Horny himself. Well, Jack's mother heard this and said, Oh, gie the coo back, Jack, gie the man a coo back. But Jack says, No, this cow was bought by our money. We are keeping the coo. And the wee man says, Oh, but Jack, the devil says if you dinna gie the coo back, he will break every bean in your body. Unless you beat him in a contest. Bring it on, says Jack. Let's hae a contest. And the wee man says, Well, if you're sure, I'll gie you a bit of advice. When you go to meet the devil the morning, put some salt, in your pooch, into your pocket, and put some pepper into the other een, and ging and see him. So that's what Jack does. And next morning he heads up the hill, and he arrives at the top of the hill, and there is this great muscly chiel. Oh, he's a giant of a bloke, and he's stunning inside a ring, a big circle that he's doing on the ground. And this big muscly bloke, devil in disguise, says, Whoever pushes the other out of the circle shall be the winner, and they shall have the cow. Well, Jack puts his hands in his pooches, and he takes out the salt and out the pepper, and when he steps into the ring, he throws the salt in the chiel's een, and he throws the pepper up his nose. And of course, the devil is going, and Jack's able to push him out of the ring, nae bother ava. And the devil turns into a wee bear and a little child and runs awa hame, greeting to his ma. Well, Jack's fair chuffed. He thinks that's fine, a coo's mine. And they carry on with their day as normal. And the next morning he's milking a coo. Fin Fa would come across the close, across the farmyard, but the wee manny with a humpy back like a tap of ben a he. Oh, Jack, All Horny's nae happy. Na, he's nae happy ava. He wants to fecht you again, another challenge. But this time, if you lose, you'll forfeit your life. Well, Jack said, it was easy yesterday, I'll hae another go. But of course his mither is saying, nah, Jack, you canna do that. Gie the coo back. Put the cow back. The devil can hae the coo. I'm nae risking losing you, my loon. You have to stay here with me. But Jack is determined, and he says, I'll take on the devil. And the wee man says, all right then, Jack, I'll tell you fit today. You take a saw, and put it at the top of the tree, doing it at the foot of the road. Right, see that big tree down there by the bottom of the road? Put a saw at the top of it. And that's what Jack does. And the next morning, when he goes down the road to stand beside a tree, fa would be coming along a road. But a great muckle bull, the biggest bull you ever saw. And it was pawing at the ground, it was snorting, it was in full bullish mode. And it lowered its head, ready to charge right at Jack. Well, Jack stood there as long as he could, and just at the very last second, he jinxed through the back of the tree, and the bull's horn got right into the trunk, and it was fair stuck. So Jack shimmied up a tree, and he got the saw, and he sawed off the bull's horns. And it turned into a wee coffee and good greeting him to its ma. And Jack thought, that's it, I've beat the devil again. I am going to hae that coo to myself. But of course, the next morning, when he's milking a coo, fa would come across it close, but the wee man with the humpy back. Fit like Jack. Fit no, said Jack. Well, the devil's still nae happy. He says he's needing another go. But this time, if you lose, you'll forfeit your very soul. Well, Jack's mither, she's stumping about. She said, you're nae doing it, Jack. Just gie the devil back a coo. It's nae worth it. Na. Come on, my loon. But Jack just ignores her. He says, I'll tak on the devil. I've beaten him twice. I'll easy do it again. Well, this time the wee man says, Jack, I canna help you. I have nae advice to gie. Are you sure you want to do this? Aye, says Jack, a div. Well, the next morning, when Jack got out to meet the devil, there was all Horny himsel in all his glory. He hid his horns and his forky tail and his cloven feet and a brecht reed face. And all Horny says, well, Jack, you've decided to take me on in a contest, I see. You may choose the weapon. Well, Jack scrats his head and he thinks, I dinna hae a gun and I canna fecht wi' a sword. What kind of weapon could I use? And he thinks, he says, I know exactly the contest. Fit about a ploughing match, a ploughing contest. And the person with the straightest furrows and the bonniest clean grun, beautiful ploughing will be the winner. Well, in a flash, the devil has produced a pair of horse, beautifully decked up with golden bridles and a golden plough, and he is all ready. And Jack goes and gets his all nag out of the shed with his wooden plough, and he's all set and all. And he tells the devil, you take that bit of the park, that section there is for you, and I'll plough this bit. And off they set. Well, the devil is going up and down and up and down, and in a blink of an eye, he's got half his bit done. And Jack is going slow and steady, because he kens that on his second now, disaster is going to strike. And sure enough, afore long, there is a loud comes for the devil, for he has struck a great big Steen, a huge boulder right in the middle of the park, and it makes a complete mess o' his ploughing. So he loses the contest. He disappears in a puff of smoke, and Jack is victorious. Well, Jack thinks, that's it. 3 contests, I'm a winner. The coup is mine. We are safe, mither. And I think they probably had some bannocks and fine cup of tea to celebrate. But the next morning, when Jack is sitting down to milk the cow, Fa would come across the close, but the wee Manny with a humpy back like a tap of ben a he. And Jack says, come on, you have to be joking. What do you need to know? Why are you still here? Well, the wee Manny says, Jack, you've defeated the devil, but I still have one thing, just a thing that you have to do. I need you to kiss the cow. Fit? What? Fit? I div like the cow, but I'm nae kissing a cow, says Jack. Just one wee peck, says the wee man. And Jack thinks, oh, well, let's get rid of the man. Will you stop coming to see me if I do that, says Jack. Yes, said the man, this will be the end of it. So Jack stands up and he goes and he plants a great big smackaroo right on the cow's nib. And in a flash, she turns into a bonny young quine, a beautiful young lady. And the Almanny with the humpy back like a tap of ben a he becomes a handsome man. Her feather, in fact. And they explain that the Laird of the Black Earth, a witch-like character, he had put a spell on them, and it could only be broken if somebody was brave enough to fecht the devil and kiss the cow. And so Jack had broken the spell, and that lass and her father, and Jack and his mother lived happily ever after. So that's the story of Jack and the cow.
Yes, wonderful.
Go, Jack! Go, Jack!
I love Jack's stories.
I have an unfamiliar expression in there. So the humpback was like a...
Oh, the humpy backed Manny, like the tap. He had a humpy back like the tap of ben a he. Okay. It's a hump on his back, a lump on his back, like the top of ben a he. Now, Ben a he is a very famous hill in the northeast of Scotland,
Okay.
and it's got like a cairn, but a natural rock cairn. It's an extinct volcano, actually, so it's almost like a volcano plug at the top of Ben a he. So it gives that impression of a lump.
So it was a big hump, actually,
A
right?
big hump, yes.
Thank you,
Yeah.
thank you. That was the only thing I didn't understand, really. I think I did pretty well, considering.
I'm sure you did. Once you get beyond words like fit, foo, fan, and far, which are, what, who, when, and where, mostly I think it's the vowel sounds that are different.
Yeah. I thought so too. It has to do with climate accent, right? Because, up there in the north it's cold. So instead of opening your mouth up wide and say now, how, you just limit it into a coo, no, coos. So it makes sense. You don't breathe in so much cold air.
Despina, that is just spot on. And we tend to speak quite quickly as well. And we generally are not very effusive. It's short, sharp, quick. That's us.
Lovely. Oh, that was so nice.
Yeah.
Brilliant story. Jackie, so you told us this story about Jack, but I seem to remember that you have some kind of passion for Jack's stories. Is that
Yeah.
true?
I do. I love Jack's stories. I think the character of Jack teaches us a lot. And again, Stanley told lots of Jack's stories. The travelling people really kept these stories alive and would sit round the campfires sharing them. So there's a wealth of Jack's stories that we can explore. And he's this sort of often a silly character who learns a lesson. In this case, obviously, he's quite a brave character. Well, some might say silly to fight the devil, but it comes good in the end. And to some extent, there's almost like a development of the character through all the stories. So I think they're wisdom stories, really. Yeah.
You know,
So
we've had Amy Douglas here in a previous episode, and she told us a lot about her mentor, Duncan Williamson.
Duncan Williamson,
So we do know
yes.
a few things about the traveling people.
Ah, yeah.
Um, I loved that the devil had this very posh British English accent. Yeah, he was the aristocrat talking down to Jack. I love that. So you have the division between classes. You have the very higher class, which are the villains, obviously, and you know the poor folk that people can
Mm,
relate to. I love that.
absolutely. It's a bit naughty of me, really, but
No, no, it's not. It's quite fair.
It's all right.
I like it.
We have a Greek fairy tale in my tradition where the naughty prince who wants to take advantage of a young lass is outwitted by her by having him kiss his donkey's not nose.
I like it.
You have to mess with the higher authority in fairy tales. Yeah, this is the folk tales. These tales of the folk. So
Absolutely, absolutely. I think that if you can't be subversive in stories, where can you be subversive?
absolutely. So, what's happening festival-wise around your neck of the woods, Jackie?
Well, we're actually just putting together a group of people in the Northeast from like the Elphinston Institute,
Mm.
Grampian Association of Storytellers, NEAT, which is the Northeast Arts Travelling. I can't remember exactly what NEAT stands for, but they're an organisation that supports artists to go to different village halls around the area. And independent storytellers like myself, we're going to form a new coalition to develop the storytelling festival in the Northeast. So we'll be getting together quite soon, obviously, to start planning for October, November time. So that's exciting because what we've found is it's much easier for us to put things on in the city, but we really want to get out into the countryside.
The rural
So I
areas,
think
yes.
NEAT will help us to do that. So we'll still get support from Edinburgh. They'll still give some funding. But I think if we have a local group, then we can go for other funding too. So, yeah. And we'll fit in with the theme, which hasn't been decided yet, for the Scottish International Storytelling Festival. But we're also looking to maybe extend across a larger part of the year because it's quite a lot of work for volunteers to have everything happening in
Yeah.
a short period of time. So we're looking to extend and build across the year a bit. So it's exciting times for storytelling. I'm also involved with the storytelling apprenticeship in Scotland as a member of the Scottish Storytelling Forum. I'm leading a subgroup that has been looking at developing the apprenticeship, and we have a 3 year apprenticeship where people can come and learn about the oral tradition, particularly how storytelling has developed in Scotland, get a chance to learn the skills of oral storytelling and also practical skills that you need if you're going to be a professional storyteller. So things like bookkeeping, PDG, which is your police check to make sure that you're a safe person to be around children, that kind of thing. So that insurance, these things, we have to be quite businesslike nowadays if we're going to be going out there as professional storytellers. So that's exciting, being involved in that. We're looking at the possibility of sometime down the line linking in with Queen Margaret University to allow people to have a formal qualification if they want to go down
Mm,
that route.
right.
Um, but we want to, keep it flexible for those who just want to learn more about storytelling, and don't necessarily want to formalise it. And then at the end of the 3 years, they can decide if they want to apply to join the storytelling directory, because that's something that we run as well. If you go through a certain process, you can join the directory, which is an online list of storytellers that people can access if they want to find a storyteller. Yeah.
Sounds wonderful. All this sounds so difficult to me, the logistics of it. You have the creative part, which is the easy part on one side. I mean, it does take a lot of work, but you do it like in a very energetic way. And then you have all the organizing, which is like combining both sides of the brain at the same time.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think so. And it's interesting because we got feedback from previous apprentices, and one of the main things that they came up with was, the practical things, although they're boring for many storytellers. I mean, they are tax, ugh, but you do need to know about these things if you want to, go into professional money making storytelling.
Yeah. Unless you have
Not
a
everybody.
manager and you share your money, the
Yeah.
money earned. Yeah, that's an option.
Well, they must pay more in your neck of the woods to spin if you can afford a manager. But we also know that not everybody, wants to be on the directory, and so that's not obligatory. We're making that a separate thing, which I think is helpful for people. And we have many people who tell stories all the time in their local community who have no desire to get paid or go out looking for a job as a storyteller.
Yeah.
So yeah, we need to encourage and support everybody, because story is what is at the heart of everything.
And I think
You
that
know,
the world nowadays is desperate for stories. We're in the midst of the Third World War, so we
yeah,
definitely need stories, and we need healing stories more than ever before, I think.
absolutely.
Jackie, you at the beginning of the interview, you told us that you look around you and there are lots of stories. And I was wondering if you wanted to tell us something about landscape stories, the stories that you see around you, and what kinds of stories are there in your neck of the woods?
Yeah. Well, I live on a farm, and actually, the farm that we live on was the birthplace of a man called Peter Williamson. And his story inspired Robert Louis Stevenson to write the book Kidnapped. So, Peter Williamson, when he was about 14, went into Aberdeen to find work, and he was kidnapped and put on a ship to America, where he was an indentured slave. Basically, he was sold. And he had many adventures, which I won't go into just now. Some of them maybe didn't quite happen. He was a good storyteller. But he had many adventures, and he came back and took out a court case against the High Hegians in Aberdeen, the magistrates and so on, who had been operating this slave trade out of the city. So that's quite exciting to know that this man was born on our farm. And then if I go just a little bit further down the road and look up to my right, I can see the hill of Craiglich. And Craiglich Hill was the meeting place of the local witches. And Lumphanan, my village, had one of the highest number of witches who were executed in Aberdeen during the witch trials. So there are many stories about the witches, these poor women who, because it was mostly women, who were healers. Or maybe one or two of them were just crabby owl wifeys, a little bit. Some of us do get a bit taciturn in our old age, and maybe we upset our neighbours. So, but that is a constant reminder to me when I walk down the road of these witches. And then, if I walk up the hill the other way, I can look down the valley to the Hill of Fair. And the Hill of Fair is the Hill of the Fairies. So that, in fact, links to a story about the fairies from Logie Colston who lived up the valley. But they lived on the laird, the lord of the area, the landowner. The laird didn't like the fairies. He wanted rid of them. And so he got a local man who may or may not have had some supernatural powers. He was certainly very friendly with the fairies. He got this local man to cast the fairies out. And so they were sent away from Logie Colston, which they loved, down to the Carl Hella Fair. And so the fairies cursed the Laird of Blaylock. Dool, dool to Blaylock, and dool to Blaylock's loons. So it's a curse
doom.
to him and his children for casting them out to this hill.
Jackie, how to pick a story between witches and fairies now
Oh,
to end this interview with? Oh, it's so hard. What
it's
jumps up the highest in your mind?
well. Do you know what? I'm going to finish with a story from the river, because just down a little bit is the River Dee, and the village of Kincardinaneel. And Kincardinaneel has its very own kelpie. Do you know what a kelpie is? The kelpie is water spirit, and they're tricksome creatures. You have to be careful. They come on land, and often they take the form of a horse. And the famous kelpies in Scotland are the sculptures made of the horses' heads. But sometimes they take the form of people, usually handsome men. The Kinker Kelpie is one of these stories. It's also different from other Kelpie stories in that it has a very unusual ending. So this is the story of the Kinker Kelpie. Sandy Ewan, the boatman, was tying up his boat. It wasn't the end of the day, but he'd looked up the Dee, right up the valley, and he could see that a storm was coming. And he did not want to be on the river, not when a storm came, because the water would rise really fast and it would be very dangerous. So he tied up his boat and he was just turning to go home, thinking about his wife's gorgeous scones and having a cup of tea, when he bumped into a stranger. He'd never seen this man before, and the stranger said, "Boatman, will you take me across the river?" Sandy was going to shake his head and say, "No, no, 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 I've tied up my boat. There's a storm coming. I am not going to risk a river crossing." But when he looked at the stranger, a really weird feeling ran right up his spine, and Sandy found that he couldn't refuse. He said, okay, but we have to be quick. I want to get back here safe." So they jumped into the boat and Sandy started to row. Well, he had hardly left the bank when the storm struck. The rain was falling like cats and dogs. It was pelting down. It was a full-blown storm. The wind was howling like banshees and the water was rising fast. The boat was starting to rock, and Sandy, an experienced boatman, Sandy was terrified. He thought, "I'm going to drown. Oh my goodness, I'm never going to see my wife again." But when he threw his head over his shoulder to look at the stranger behind him, the man was sitting there, cool as a cucumber. He looked like they were going for a little pleasure ride down the river on a Sunday afternoon. And in that instant, Sandy knew this was no ordinary man. This was Kelpie. His heart sank. He thought, well, if the river doesn't get me, Kelpie will. I am done for. But He was a good northeast man. He didn't give up easily. So he fought against the waves, he fought against his fear, and he fought hard enough to get to the other side. And when they reached the bank, Sandy thought, well, at least I've survived the river. And he braced himself for Kelpie. But the stranger jumped onto the shore, turned, and said, how much am I owe you, boatman? Sandy says, oh, no, 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 I don't want any money. No, 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 no. I am just happy to have made it safe to the other side. And Kelpie nodded and ran off down the bank. But wafting back on the wind, Sandy could hear some words. The dee'll be calm and safe forever, while you and your loons hae a boat on the river. Kelpie had actually blessed the boatman, not cursed him. And Sandy was amazed, for instantly the river ran calm, the wind stopped howling, and the rain ceased. And he was able to row back safely and go and tell his wife the whole story. And you can be sure that she told the whole village, and that's how I know the story today. I thought I'll
An
do that one
excellent,
in English for you.
an excellent story. Yes, yes. We're so happy you got to hear that story. Now we heard it, and now our listeners heard it as well.
And Jackie, you told us that the ending is different because usually kelpies, they're not benevolent creatures.
No happy ending with
No,
Kelpies.
normally they're not. But then, if you think about it, the Laird of Morphy, he captured a Kelpie because Kelpies were very, very strong. So the one he captured is in horse form. And if you could put a bridle on a Kelpie, then it was your slave. And the Laird of Morphy worked that horse day and night, and he didn't treat it at all well. So when by accident somebody took the bridle off and freed the Kelpie, you kind of can understand why it would want to curse the Laird of Morphy. So I think to some extent, I think I quite often tell the two stories together and we think about, okay, what is the difference here? The Laird of Kelpie, the Laird of Morphy mistreated the Kelpie. Sandy Ewan, well, he was very kind to the Kelpie. He risked his life for the Kelpie. So, is it not you reap what you sowed?
Right. And you don't
You
have an
know,
unjustified villain out of the blue. There is a reason behind it. We had the same, Simone, with the troll sisters who were overworked by the man who captured them. Do you remember? And then, of course, once they were freed, they would have to take revenge. They were not the villain trolls that appear later on in fairy tales, and nobody knows why. I love these stories that justify the vindictiveness of some creatures because of, evil human nature, actually.
yeah, yeah. I mean, there might be an element of warning children away from water. I don't know. But for me, I far prefer taking the approach of let's treat people the way we want to be treated. No, we are very lucky to have so many exciting stories on my doorstep.
And stories that have been preserved. I'm sure that, for example, even here where I live, there must be stories that had been told about the places where I live, but the problem is that they were not preserved in the way that they were passed down orally through generations. So maybe there are books talking about the stories of the land, but they are not well-known stories because they haven't been passed down
Yeah.
orally, and so it's not something that we grow up with.
And you know what,
And
Simona? Maybe there are no books, or maybe there are not enough books, or maybe there should be books about them. That's food for thought for you. You're the young generation
yes.
there.
But quite often, like the story of the boatman, one of my favourite books is called The Primitive Beliefs of the Northeast of Scotland. and it was written in the 1800s. And so you will find the little blessing told by the Kelpie in there. And you'll find, the boatman Sandy Ewan met the Kelpie and got this blessing. So that's the extent of the story, if you like. So you then create the other bits around it. But how fantastic that that has been preserved, and the fact that his name is preserved. So, this was obviously something that was very alive in people's minds when that was written down. So, yeah, sometimes we just have fragments. My mother always told me that one of the other hills, on the foothills of the Grampian, from where we lived, you could see this hollow at the bottom of the hills, and up at the top was another stack, a knobbly bit. And you could imagine that the knobbly bit would fit in the hollow. So she told me that once the devil had bit this chunk of earth out of the hollow and spit it at the top of the hill and buried his wife under it. Now, I don't know if my mother made that up or if this is folklore. I've never found a reference to it, but it is definitely tradition as far as I'm concerned. So, you get these lovely little things. And I love doing work with children quite often if we're creating stories, making up pourquoi stories. How did that stone land in the middle of the river? Why is that hill shaped like it is? Fantastic motivation, inspiration for a story. Yeah.
Yes, that's lovely.
It is lovely. Yeah. In fact, I love this one. John must be in his 30s now, but when he was in primary 2, we were writing pourquoi stories, but it was ones about how the animal became the way it did. And he wrote this lovely story about the peacock and how it got its colourful feathers. The peacock was really sad because it was just brown. Every single feather was brown, and he looked at all these other birds that had lovely colours and wanted it. And he went and hid in the forest, and he was pecking around under the trees, and all the leaves fell off the trees onto the peacock and gave him the beautiful colours. Isn't that lovely?
It is, yes.
It's just such a lovely, simple
Yeah.
story out of the mind of a primary 2, so that would be like a 6, 7-year-old. So, John has no idea that I tell his story regularly. But I do. Yeah.
The best minds to work with, preschoolers and
Oh,
early primary. Like
yeah.
you said, no inhibitions.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. Anything goes.
Oh, this has been wonderful, Jackie. Thank you so much for your stories and all you do story-wise. You're doing a brilliant work. Keep at it. And for
Thank
the
you.
Scots, of course. Yeah, it was a lovely experience for us to have some original stories from your land.
Well, thank you. And if you're ever in this neck of the woods, please do come and I can show you where the Warlock Stone is and take you to where the fairies would rather live and all other sorts of
And
stories we
go,
can go
go,
into.
go on that hill and unbury the devil's wife, please. Let's free her. Let's
We
dig
can
her up.
do that.
Thank you so much, Jackie. It was a real honor to have you here on the podcast. It was brilliant to have a chat with you. It's always wonderful to catch up and talk stories with you.
Well, it's been fantastic. Thank you very much. I've thoroughly enjoyed myself and haste you back.
Simona's got a question. I can see a question
Oh,
mark above
yeah,
her.
okay, question.
Can you translate that? Hasty back?
Haste you back. Come back quickly.
Yes,
So you
let's
are
get you
welcome
back
anytime.
together. Yes,
Yeah,
Oh,
let's
yeah,
get
right.
you back together, something like that.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah, yeah. Mhm.
Oh, nice. I had never heard that. Or maybe I had heard that, never asked the question. So who knows?
Now you can use it with your Scottish friends.
There you
Yes.
go.
Excellent. We'll have an awesome day, and I hope you get some very much loved sunshine over there.
I'm gonna go out again and have another walk, definitely. It's looking so gorgeous. Take
Bye.
care.
Bye bye.
Bye.